Let's move on now to bring in our guest, Brenden Boudreau, from the pro-gun lobby. Brenden, welcome to Off the Record. You are here because a couple of weeks ago we had people on who want to do some gun control, and let's get your take on what should be done on that issue, if anything, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I appreciate you having me on the show this morning. And from our point of view, what happened, of course, a few weeks ago in Oxford was an absolute tragedy. And as a father, I grieve with the family members of the victims here. The problem that we have here is that there was a quick knee-jerk reaction to what happened. And it immediately turned to we need more gun control. Before all the facts of the story were even released to the public, we had the Oakland County prosecutor, we had the attorney general, we had several Democrat lawmakers in Lansing talking about a myriad of gun control proposals that they were going to introduce, all of which had very little relevancy to what actually happened here. There were already 9 laws that the assailant broke in the process of committing the crime that he did. So it's frustrating because once again, this tragedy was politicized from day one. And, we took the strong stance that we need to know all the facts here before anything is said. And we're going to make sure that the things that we believe in and that we fight for as an organization, our members and supporters support us for, are protected.
Jordan.
So, on that note, you're saying that stricter gun control laws have shown to not work, or you're arguing against stricter gun control laws. Considering that we have not really enacted very strict laws within the last, couple of years, I guess, how do you see this as, we don't need to pivot to any type of stricter gun control laws, considering that what's currently in place doesn't seem to be working?
Thanks for the question, Jordan. And in response to that, I would say that I think there was a misquote or misunderstanding by the Oakland County prosecutor who said that Michigan has very few gun laws. Michigan actually has a decent pile of gun laws currently on the books. Looking at weapons-free school zone policies that were enforced in Oxford or in school districts across the country. It was illegal for the individual to have a gun. It's illegal to kill someone. There are all these laws that are already on the books that did not do what they're proposed to do. We have a form of pistol registration. What did that do? It's a 5-year felony to carry without a concealed pistol license. What did that do? So, there's just this idea, well, we need more laws and more laws will solve all of society's ills, but yet the very laws that are on the books didn't do what they're supposed to do.
Jordan, follow up?
I was just going to say, if I could jump in with a follow-up there. Where then do you think this whole situation fell apart? I understand we're still learning about a lot of the facts of Oxford, but in your mind, if the answer is not more gun control laws, where do you see, improvements should have been made or actions should have been taken?
Yeah, I think that as the evidence has come out, as the prosecutor has released the information, we have plenty of evidence that shows that people knew that there was a potential problem as early as that morning. You look at the response by the parents to the news after the shooting started. The parents knew that there was a problem here. The school knew that there was a problem here. So that's where clearly someone has to be held accountable for what happened here. And similar situations happened in other instances. The shooting in Florida a few years ago, where there were so many instances where there was a possibility to stop the shooter from doing something, but the action was not followed through on. And ultimately a horrible situation happened because of it.
Eric?
Yeah, I just wondering, because we hear all the time that people want action, not just thoughts and prayers. And when we sit here and say that laws are there and they're not being followed, they want some sort of response, especially when it happens here in Michigan. It's one thing when it happens other places. So what is the downside, I guess, or is there a compromise that can be found? Like Senator Bayer's proposed high-capacity magazine. That's something that's tangible where it's not just that whether they're following the laws or not, where you're just going to be harder to have a larger capacity magazine. So you may have to reload 1 or 2 more times. And that 30 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds gives someone a chance to either stop them or get away. It just seems like that might be a compromise that they were kind of trying to look for, so that they can say they did something instead of just sitting by and moving forward and hoping people follow the law.
And I appreciate the question, Eric. What I would say to that is that passing laws because they feel good is not good policy making. That's often how bad laws get passed. I understand that there's the knee-jerk emotional reaction that we have to do something here. Well, sometimes there isn't something that can be done in this instance, except for looking at the laws that are already on the books in regards to that were already broken, and say that guns are not the problem here. The problem is that the system that was supposed to protect those students failed. So that's where, the magazine ban, these have passed in other states. I know that Senator Bayer claimed that, there's studies that show that they have some kind of a impact on crime. I can tell you that I have studies on the other side that say that they have zero impact on crime. In fact, these laws are practically unenforceable.
Follow up, Eric?
What would you propose that be done then? I mean, just some sort of action, whether it be mental health, whether it be how schools handle situations. I mean, is there some other action that can be done if it's not limiting gun control or gun use and ownership?
I would say that as a society, we have problems. I would say that we have societal issues with just a low value on human life. That I think that plays into effect here. I think we also have to consider the fact that we guard our politicians in the state capitol with a half dozen state troopers, and whereas there was one resource officer in a school of 1,800, and then a weapons-free school zone policy. These policies, if we believe that children are, and I am a father, I believe that children are the future. We should be taking more proactive actions to protect our children in similar ways that we would politicians, for example.
Mr. Pluta.
So, well, first of all, we should point out that you are not the gun lobby, that you are one gun rights organization and a bunch of them who kind of consider you at the extreme end of their movement. Is there something, I mean, we're talking about this, but are the Republicans in the legislature being weak-kneed by not loosening restrictions on firearms, in your opinion?
I would say yes. And the reason here is, I'll give you an example. Here in the state of Michigan, as I already said, it's a 5-year felony to carry without a concealed pistol license. And in a state like California that people would claim, would see as a state that has passed much gun control, it's a misdemeanor. So for us, it's a Second Amendment issue, but it's also a criminal justice issue. Should we be throwing people in jail for what is essentially a victimless crime? It is legal to open carry a handgun in Michigan without a permit, but all of a sudden you put on a coat and you're a felon. Or if you carry with an expired CPL if you are carrying with an expired CPL by 1 day, it's a felony. And that's a fix-it ticket for, if your registration is lapsed, you can go get that fixed. So we believe that the right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental right, and it should not be criminalized.
Mr. Pluta, follow up.
Well, then what is your solution for the issue of gun violence, especially gun violence in schools and among young people?
Well, I kind of touched on this already. Ultimately, the issue in general is violence. It isn't just gun violence. And I think that needs to be recognized, that, quite often when we're talking about violence in America, we want to separate out gun violence from the rest of the violence and then act as if, America's the only country that has a violence issue. You look at other nations, that have heavier gun restrictions. They still have gun violence, and they have other forms of violence as well. So this isn't just some American pandemic. You can look at that studies that show that the levels of violence in the United States are no different than other nations across the world. when it comes to violence in general. So, I do believe that allowing law-abiding citizens to arm themselves deters crime. We have study after study that show that.
Were you upset when the word came out that apparently the Republican leader in the Senate, Mr. Shirkey, has given assurances that there could be a hearing on the red flag legislation? Are you guys on board with that, or did Mr. Shirkey make a mistake?
We believe he made a mistake there. He did that a couple of years ago. It was actually the same day as the Second Amendment march in Lansing, which I was at. And actually that day was delivering petitions in opposition to red flag laws, which are a clear violation of due process, American jurisprudence. They are problematic. And so it is frustrating for the gun rights community for Senate Majority Leader Shirkey to promise hearings for a clearly anti-gun law, whereas every pro-gun bill that ends up in the Senate ends up in his drawer and doesn't even receive a hearing.
So how is it that a pro-gun Senate Republican leader, Mr. Shirkey, would, quote, make this, your word, a mistake? How did he get this wrong?
Well, I think that I can't read into the mind of Senator Shirkey, but I think that sometimes there are bad advisors. There's also just the song and dance of the legislature. We got to give a little to get a little, and all because you're a Republican does not mean that you're pro-gun. That's something that I've learned time and time again, that partisan labels don't really mean that much. Yes, typically Republicans are more pro-gun than Democrats, but there are also pro-gun Democrats out there. It was Jennifer Granholm, Governor Granholm, who signed Michigan's Stand Your Ground law and Castle Doctrine into law back in 2006. So, this isn't, it's more partisan now, but there was a time when it was not that partisan of an issue.
But let's be clear here. Allowing a hearing is not the same that he's going to allow the legislation to pass. For the sake of the democracy, couldn't you sign off on a hearing on an issue like this?
We'd rather not even open the door to such a horrendous policy to even get a hearing.
Well, some would argue it's part of democracy to have a hearing, isn't it?
And if he wants to hold the hearing, that's up to his prerogative as Senate leader. He'll just be hearing from gun rights supporters across the state who are opposed to it.
All right, Jordan?
Yeah, I guess I'm having trouble squaring the logic being used here. You say that something should have been done promptly or that there were signs that were missed, but how can you say that and then say that red flag laws are not the issue if it seems like that's explicitly what red flag laws are made to do, is find those early warning signs, catch them, and take guns out of the hands of individuals who are either not mentally able to possess these, they have some form of issue. Like, I guess, how do you square that?
So what I would say, first of all, is that there were opportunities with the current laws on the books to have this situation dealt with. What I would say the issues with red flag laws is that ultimately, first of all, who would it apply to? To the shooter, or would it apply to his parents? It's not exactly clear. The problem ultimately is an issue of due process rights. We as Americans value our due process rights, and red flag laws basically throw those out the window.
Brenden, thank you very much for being on our broadcast.